For most believers, the opening words of Genesis, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth," are among the most sacred and unquestionable lines in Scripture. They set the stage for everything we think we know about reality, that a benevolent Creator shaped the world with purpose, order, and love. But what if that assumption has blinded us to a deeper and more disturbing truth? What if the being who fashioned this physical world was not the ultimate, all-loving God, but an imposter, a false creator who wrapped himself in divine authority to keep humanity under his control? This figure, known in ancient Gnostic writings as the Demiurge, challenges everything we have been taught about God, creation, and the very purpose of our existence. The word Demiurge means craftsman or builder, and in the mystical traditions of the early church, it referred to a lesser deity, one who shaped the material cosmos, but was not the source of ultimate truth or light. According to these teachings, the true God, the hidden Father beyond all worlds, was pure spirit, infinite love, and light beyond comprehension. The Demiurge, by contrast, was jealous, flawed, and obsessed with power. He was not the origin of life, but the manipulator of it, not the eternal source of wisdom, but the one who trapped souls in the prison of flesh and matter. This was not a metaphor to the Gnostics. It was their radical, dangerous claim about the reality we inhabit. When we look back at the Bible with this possibility in mind, unsettling patterns emerge. Why does the God of the Old Testament appear so often as wrathful, demanding sacrifice, ordering wars, and calling himself a jealous God? Why does Jesus in the New Testament speak of a Father who is spirit, who dwells in light inaccessible, and yet also warn about the ruler of this world, who blinds the minds of humanity? These are not contradictions when read through the lens of the Demiurge. They are clues that point to the existence of a counterfeit power, masquerading as divine, but in truth, opposed to the God revealed by Christ. This is not just an abstract, theological debate. If the Demiurge exists, then the entire structure of human society, our systems of power, religion, and control, may have been built on a lie. To uncover this truth is to question not only history, but the very foundation of our faith. And in this video, we are going to follow that thread, from the ancient writings of the Gnostics to the hidden layers of Scripture, to see whether the God of this world is the God of eternity, or an impostor who has deceived the nations for millennia. Long before church councils codified the doctrines of Christianity, a storm of ideas swirled among early followers of Christ. Among them were the Gnostics, mystics and seekers, who claimed to have received secret knowledge, gnosis, that explained the true nature of the universe. To the Gnostics, the material world was not a paradise created for humanity's flourishing. It was a flawed imitation, a prison designed to keep souls chained to suffering and ignorance. And at the center of this prison was the Demiurge, the false creator. The Demiurge was described as a craftsman, a lower being who shaped matter but did not originate spirit. Unlike the hidden Father of light, who existed beyond time and space, the Demiurge was born from error, arrogance, or rebellion. Some texts depict him as the offspring of Sophia, the divine wisdom, who fell from the fullness of God and inadvertently gave rise to this distorted power. The Demiurge, ignorant of the true source, proclaimed himself the only God, demanding worship and obedience from the creatures he had formed. This arrogance is what made him dangerous. He believed himself supreme, when in reality he was cut off from the infinite. The Nag Hammadi library, discovered in Egypt in 1945, preserves many of these radical texts. In writings like the Apocryphon of John and the Hypostasis of the Archons, the Demiurge appears under names like Yaldabaoth or Saklas. He is portrayed as lion-faced, serpentine, and blind, powerful yet deluded, creating a world that mirrored his own corruption. To the Gnostics, the world we see is not the handiwork of the true God, but a flawed copy, filled with death, decay, and injustice. Every natural disaster, every disease, every act of violence was evidence of a cosmos governed by a counterfeit ruler rather than a loving creator. What is even more shocking is how the Gnostics interpreted the Hebrew scriptures. When the Old Testament described a God who was jealous, wrathful, and hungry for sacrifices, the Gnostics did not see the true Father. They saw the Demiurge. They read the Lord of Hosts as the arrogant craftsman who enslaved humanity to laws and punishments. For them, the God of Israel was not the supreme deity, but a shadow, a false authority who mistook his own limitations for divinity. In this light, the creation story itself was turned upside down. Not a blessing, but the moment when souls of divine light were trapped in material bodies, bound to labor and suffering under the Demiurge's rule. To the Gnostics, salvation was not about pleasing this false creator. It was about awakening, remembering that within every human soul was a spark of the true divine, older and higher than the Demiurge. Through Christ, they believed, that hidden spark could be ignited, freeing souls from the prison of matter and guiding them back to the eternal source. This was their revolutionary claim, that the God most people worshipped was not the God revealed by Jesus, but an impostor who had deceived the nations. If the Demiurge is more than a myth, we should expect to find his shadow even in the sacred pages of Scripture. And indeed, when we reread the Bible through the lens of Gnostic insight, passages that once seemed puzzling or contradictory begin to take on a new, unsettling meaning. The Bible itself may hold the clues that point to the existence of a false creator. In the Old Testament, the Lord often presents himself as jealous and wrathful. In Exodus, he demands exclusive worship, declaring, "You shall have no other gods before me." Exodus chapter 20:1-3. But why would a truly infinite, all-encompassing God fear rivals? Jealousy implies insecurity, and insecurity is the mark of limitation, not perfection. Again and again, this deity insists on burnt offerings, animal sacrifices, and unquestioning obedience, punishing those who resist. He leads Israel through wars, commands the destruction of entire nations, and brings plagues as judgment. To the Gnostic reader, this is not the behavior of the boundless source of light. It is the posture of a false ruler, obsessed with control and blood. The prophet Isaiah records God saying, "I form the light and create darkness. I make peace and create evil. Isaiah 45:7. Such a declaration seems to merge opposites into one being, the creator of both good and evil. But in the Gnostic framework, this makes sense only if the speaker is the Demiurge, the craftsman who shapes a world of duality, mixing light with shadow, truth with lies. The true God, beyond all duality, could never be the author of evil. When we turn to the New Testament, we find Jesus and the apostles drawing a sharp contrast. Jesus speaks of a Father who is pure spirit, dwelling in unapproachable light, far beyond the world of matter. Yet he also warns of the ruler of this world, John chapter 12:31, a figure who blinds minds and keeps humanity in bondage. Paul echoes this in his letters. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world. Ephesians 6:12. These are not poetic phrases about temptation. They are descriptions of a hidden hierarchy of spiritual oppressors. Could it be that Jesus and Paul were pointing toward the reality of the Demiurge and his servants, the archons? Even the Gospel of John begins with a striking distinction. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Through him all things were made. This identifies Christ not with the jealous deity of sacrifice and law, but with the true creative logos, the light that transcends the material prison. If so, then Christ's mission was not simply to fulfill the old covenant, but to expose its counterfeit source, to liberate humanity from the grasp of the Demiurge, and reveal the true Father hidden beyond the heavens. This reading of Scripture is uncomfortable, even shocking. But it is precisely this discomfort that forces us to confront the possibility that the Bible contains layers, some reflecting the voice of the false creator, others whispering of the eternal source. The question is not whether God speaks in the Bible, but which God we are actually hearing in its pages. Once we begin to distinguish between the Demiurge and the true source, an entire new framework of understanding opens up before us. The two could not be more different in character, and yet throughout history they have been confused, conflated, or deliberately blended together. This confusion has allowed the false creator to hide in plain sight, masquerading as the one true God. To separate them is not only an intellectual exercise, but a spiritual necessity, because our soul's allegiance depends on knowing the difference. The Demiurge, according to the Gnostics, is a being of limitation. He is marked by jealousy, violence, and hunger for recognition. His world is one of fear and control, a hierarchy in which human beings exist to serve him through obedience, sacrifice, and suffering. His commands are legalistic, his justice retributive, and his creation riddled with decay. He claims authority by declaring himself the only God. But this claim is itself the proof of his ignorance. For the infinite does not need to assert its supremacy. It simply is. The Demiurge is like a counterfeit king seated on a throne of dust, shouting about his power while hiding the cracks in his crown. By contrast, the true God, the hidden Father revealed by Christ, is infinite spirit, beyond matter, beyond time, beyond jealousy or wrath. This God is pure love, light, and truth, needing no sacrifice to be satisfied, and demanding no violence to establish authority. Instead of fear, the true God inspires freedom. Instead of commanding destruction, the true God breathes life. When Jesus spoke of the Father, he spoke of one who was not of this world, whose kingdom was eternal, and whose light shines in the darkness, but is not overcome. In the Sermon on the Mount, we hear the voice of the true God. Love your enemies, forgive endlessly, seek the kingdom within. Such words cannot be reconciled with the jealous deity of wrath, who ordered genocide in ancient Canaan. They are of a different source entirely. This stark contrast forces a question. When we read Scripture, are we discerning which voice belongs to the Demiurge and which belongs to the Eternal Father? Jesus himself hinted at this distinction when he told the Pharisees, "You are of your father the devil, and your will is to do your father's desires. He was a murderer from the beginning." John 3:44. Strong words, but what if they point not only to Satan as a tempter, but to the counterfeit God, who from the very beginning demanded blood and perpetuated death? In this reading, Christ becomes the revealer, not only of salvation, but of the shocking truth that humanity has long been worshiping a false image. Early Christian thinkers wrestled with this tension. Some, like Marcion of Sinope in the 2nd century, openly declared that the God of the Old Testament was not the Father of Jesus Christ, but the Demiurge, a lower power who created the world of suffering. Marcion's teachings were condemned as heresy, but his questions never died. They echo in our own time as believers struggle to reconcile the God who commands the slaughter of innocents with the God who sends his Son to die for enemies. The two cannot be harmonized without distortion. They must be separated. One is the false creator, the other the true God of love. And this is not merely a matter of theology. It has direct implications for how we live. If we worship the Demiurge, we align ourselves with fear, control, and the endless cycles of violence and law. If we awaken to the true source, we align ourselves with love, freedom, and the eternal light that transcends this world. Our choices, our loyalties, and our very understanding of salvation hang on this distinction. Christ's invitation was never to bow before a jealous ruler, but to awaken to the Father beyond all rulers, the God who is spirit and truth. This, then, is the heart of the shocking claim. The God most of humanity has served for millennia may not be the true God at all, but the Demiurge, a false creator who has deceived nations, demanded worship, and hidden the eternal light behind a veil of lies. To follow Christ is to pierce that veil and rediscover the source beyond all counterfeits. If the Demiurge is the false creator, then he does not work alone. Just as the true God has messengers of light, so the Demiurge has rulers and servants who carry out his will. In Gnostic writings, these beings are called archons, cosmic authorities, who enforce the Demiurge's order and keep human souls bound in ignorance. They are the wardens of the prison world, maintaining control through fear, deception, and manipulation. The Apocryphon of John describes the archons as grotesque, hybrid beings, each fashioned in the Demiurge's distorted image. They are said to govern the 7 planetary spheres, creating layers of barriers that the soul must pass through after death. Their purpose is not to guide, but to hinder, questioning the soul and trying to drag it back into the cycle of rebirth. To the Gnostics, every star and planet represented not a neutral piece of creation, but a domain guarded by these rulers, each demanding allegiance to the false order of the cosmos. The universe, in this view, was a fortress built to keep humanity asleep. The Bible itself makes cryptic references that echo this theme. Paul writes that we struggle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world. Ephesians chapter 6:12. He warns of the God of this age, who blinds minds so they cannot see the truth of Christ. 2 Corinthians 4. These phrases, stripped of their familiarity, sound remarkably similar to Gnostic teachings about the Demiurge and his archons. The idea that humanity is oppressed by hidden rulers was not foreign to the earliest Christians. It was part of their worldview, later suppressed as orthodoxy hardened. In apocryphal Jewish texts like the Book of Enoch, we encounter the Watchers, fallen angels, who descended to earth, corrupted humanity, and established systems of violence. These Watchers, too, can be seen as archons, serving not the true God, but the counterfeit ruler. Their goal was not only physical domination, but spiritual corruption, binding humanity to the patterns of lust, war, and pride. The thread is consistent. There are forces in the unseen realms that seek to enslave rather than liberate. In modern terms, the archons can be understood as both literal spiritual beings and symbolic of systems of control. Political empires, economic systems, and even corrupted religious institutions can act as instruments of the archonic order, keeping people focused on survival, wealth, and obedience rather than awakening to the divine spark within. Whether personal or systemic, the archons work to maintain the illusion that this world is ultimate, that there is no truth beyond the Demiurge's dominion. Understanding the role of the archons is essential, because it reframes spiritual warfare as more than resisting temptation. It is the ongoing battle to break through layers of deception, to strip away the chains of fear, and to reclaim our birthright as children of the true God. Christ's mission in this light was to expose not only the Demiurge, but also his rulers, to declare that their authority ends at the threshold of the soul awakened to truth. If the Demiurge built the material cosmos as a prison, then his ultimate goal is not merely to shape the physical world, but to keep human souls bound within it. According to Gnostic tradition, each person carries within them a spark of the true divine, a fragment of light that comes from the eternal source beyond creation. The Demiurge cannot destroy this spark, but he can distract it, distort it, and imprison it in endless cycles of suffering. His greatest weapon is not brute force, but deception. One way the Demiurge ensnares souls is through the body itself. By binding spirit to flesh, he creates a constant tension between the longing for transcendence and the limitations of material existence. Hunger, pain, desire, and mortality all serve as chains that keep the soul focused on survival rather than awakening. Life under the Demiurge becomes a cycle of chasing needs and fears, leaving little room to remember the infinite light hidden within. Another trap lies in the cycle of time. Many Gnostic texts suggest that reincarnation was a mechanism of the false creator, a way to recycle souls back into the prison of flesh. Each lifetime brings new lessons, but also new attachments, binding souls more tightly to the wheel of birth and death. Instead of finding liberation, most people are drawn back again and again, deceived into thinking this world is the only reality. Ecclesiastes' haunting refrain, "Vanity of vanities, all is vanity," echoes this despair. Endless toil under the sun, with no lasting gain. The Demiurge also works through illusion, what we might call the glamour of the world. Wealth, status, and power are dangled before humanity as symbols of success. But in truth, they are distractions. They feed the ego, not the soul, and leave the divine spark buried beneath layers of pride and fear. False religions and corrupted spiritual systems serve the same purpose. Instead of leading seekers to the true God, they demand obedience to laws, sacrifices, and rituals that ultimately reinforce the Demiurge's dominion. Even good things, family, culture, achievement, can become snares when they are exalted above the soul's calling to awaken. Fear is perhaps the Demiurge's most effective weapon. Fear of death, fear of punishment, fear of losing security. All of these keep souls chained to his order. He rules by convincing humanity that he is the ultimate authority, that to disobey him is to fall into chaos. Yet in reality, the chaos is his creation, and the true God exists beyond it. As long as fear dominates, freedom remains out of reach. Christ's message strikes directly at this prison. When he says, "The truth will set you free," he reveals the essence of salvation, liberation from the Demiurge's system of deception. By awakening to the divine spark, recognizing that we are not of this world, and refusing to be ruled by fear, the soul begins to slip through the cracks of the prison walls. What the Demiurge built to enslave, Christ came to expose. At first glance, the concept of the Demiurge may seem like a relic of ancient mysticism, an abstract debate long buried in the dust of Gnostic texts. But the more closely we look at the world around us, the more urgently this idea confronts us. If the Demiurge represents the false god of control, deception, and fear, then his influence is not confined to the past. It is alive in the present, woven into the very fabric of our societies, religions, and personal struggles. Consider the systems that dominate our world today. Governments driven by power rather than justice, economies that value profit over human dignity, and technologies that promise freedom but often deepen dependence. These structures may appear secular, but at their core, they operate on the same principles as the archons of old, keeping humanity distracted, enslaved, and blind to its divine essence. Every time fear is used to manipulate, every time division is stoked to maintain control, the fingerprints of the Demiurge can be seen. He no longer needs to appear as a wrathful god on a mountain. His presence is felt in the machinery of a world that thrives on keeping us asleep. Religion, too, has not escaped his touch. When faith is reduced to obedience, when worship is motivated by fear of punishment rather than love of God, the Demiurge's shadow is at work. Even within Christianity, the temptation persists to present God as a tyrant demanding sacrifices, rather than the Father of light revealed by Christ. The tragedy is that millions may unknowingly serve the counterfeit God, mistaking submission for salvation. This does not mean that all religion is false. It means that discernment is essential, that the true God must be sought beyond the forms and institutions that often bear the mark of the false creator. On a personal level, the Demiurge manifests in the voices that whisper, "We are unworthy, trapped, and powerless." He thrives in cycles of shame, addiction, and despair. His goal is not only global domination, but individual paralysis, convincing each soul that there is no escape beyond the material struggle. Yet this is precisely where the message of Christ cuts through. "Take heart, I have overcome the world." John chapter 16:33. These words are not platitudes. They are a declaration of victory over the Demiurge's prison. Why does the Demiurge still matter today? Because his deception shapes the lens through which we interpret reality. To ignore him is to remain enslaved by his systems. To recognize him is to begin the process of liberation. The call of Christ is not to worship the false ruler, but to awaken to the Father who exists beyond all fear and control. And that awakening is as urgent now as it was 2,000 years ago. In the end, the Demiurge is not just an ancient myth, but a living metaphor, and perhaps more than a metaphor, for the forces that hold humanity captive. Exposing him is not about indulging in esoteric speculation. It is about reclaiming our true inheritance as children of light, breaking free from the counterfeit God, and stepping into the freedom that only the true source can give. We have walked a difficult path together, one that challenges centuries of tradition and unsettles the very foundations of how we view God, Christianity, and salvation. From the whispers of the Gnostics to the hidden clues in Scripture, the image of the Demiurge emerges not as a harmless myth, but as a profound key to understanding why the world feels so fractured, so unjust, so unlike the work of a truly loving Creator. The shocking truth is this: the God who shaped the material cosmos may not be the God revealed by Christ, but a counterfeit power who has enslaved humanity through fear, deception, and control. And yet, within that darkness lies the greater revelation. The true God, the eternal source, the Father of light, has never abandoned us. The divine spark within every soul cannot be extinguished, no matter how strong the prison walls of the Demiurge appear. Christ came not to validate the jealous ruler of this world, but to unmask him, to expose his counterfeit reign, and to remind us of our true origin. His words, his life, and his resurrection point us back to the infinite, to the God who is beyond all wrath, beyond all limitation, beyond the chains of matter and time. The question we must each confront is this: who are we truly worshiping? Is our faith directed toward the ruler of this world, who demands obedience and thrives on fear? Or have we begun to see through the illusion, awakening to the God who is love, who liberates, who calls us sons and daughters of eternity? This is not an abstract debate, but the most urgent decision of our lives. Because what we choose to believe shapes not only our destiny, but our present freedom. The Demiurge thrives when we remain blind, when we accept the world as it is without question. But the moment we awaken, the moment we remember that we are not of this world, his power begins to crumble. The veil lifts, and the prison walls lose their hold. That is the legacy of Christ's message, not submission to a false creator, but liberation into the truth of the eternal God. So as we close, take this with you. The world around you may be full of shadows, but the light within you is older, stronger, and destined to return to its source. The false god can deceive, but he cannot destroy. The truth has always been greater, and it is the truth that will set you free.